Hey guys, this is Meditation Amsterdam. This is Pablo, and today's topic is going to be, can you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps in the whole self-realization or self-cultivation topic. Now, if you think these are cool topics, do like and subscribe. And without further ado, so this is the question that follows many spiritual practitioners or people who are engaged in these kind of discussions about self-realization. The very ego that you're trying to get rid of is the one that engages in practices and austerities and studying Ramana Maharshi and whatever, right? So there's a certain kind of irony there that it's all pretend, really, right? Like that the ego can't possibly make any of this happen because it is the fundamental problem to begin with. Now, that apparent, and the other camp argues that unless you put in a ton of effort, you're only going to think that you have become free and self-realized, but really you're just trapped in another little egoic, circle jerk in your head. Now, so the apparent challenge that arises here could be seen as an incorrect framing of what constitutes actual spiritual practice or spiritual practice that can effectively take you to the next level. It also suffers from the idea on both camps, actually, that there's one superior spiritual practice or one kind that you need to go do from beginning to end. So that's also problematic, let's say, as an assumption. And the last one, which is probably the most significant one, is it all rests on the idea that the work that you are doing needs to be a cause and effect direct output, or rather effort slash output type of direct influence. So very kind of Aristotelian, very three-dimensional. I push, object moves type of situation. So, in order to illustrate that, you can imagine that there is there's an object in a bottle, right? And there's two ways that object can get to the top of the bottle when it's full of water. One of them is that if that object had a mind and legs and stuff, it would try to jump up, but it can't make it. Its density it won't allow it. And it can try to pull itself up by its own bootstraps, and every effort is going to be essentially laughable. It's not that object at the bottom of the bottle is not equipped to make that jump. Its density, it's the very problem that gives it the ability to move and have an opinion. It's the very thing that keeps it at the bottom of the bottle. So the only option that object has is to indirectly try to become more buoyant, right? To do something about that density that keeps it at the bottom. And that something is to use the strength that it was trying to use to make an upward jump or to pull itself up, to use that strength to chip away at the elements that make it dense. Now, so long as that is happening, there's a funny dynamic going on, because it's chipping away at kind of the source of its linear strength. So it's using its linear strength to destroy its own linear strength. It's like a person, who's grabbing onto a branch, but with the other hand, or sitting on a branch, grabbing on with one hand, and with the other hand is actually sawing off its the very branch that is holding on to. So it's a kind of circular, funny kind of work. You could think of another analogy, which is you could think of this idea that you're trying to get rid of all your mental programs, and spirituality is a program that you're using to do it. So would that not be contradictory? But spirituality is a very peculiar type of program if you use it in the way it is intended, because you could think of it as a kind of virus. Now, virus is in principle a program, But you could write a virus that deletes every other program and then deletes itself at the end, right? So it's that kind of funny circular dynamic that goes on for a while, actually. Now, the way I'd like to think about it, so let's take again this analogy of the object at the bottom of a bottle trying to go to the surface. So it starts to use its linear strength, the strength that it tried to use to jump up, and it chips away at its own density, and it kind of empties itself up with its own strength, right? So it's using its strength to empty itself up. And the more it does that, the more it comes across denser and denser things for which its linear strength starts to become really not the tool for the job, right? So it got it so far, it got it far enough so that it could understand what it was trying to do. It got it far enough so that it could make progress in what it was trying to do. But that yang type of approach of doing starts to reach the limit to how much chipping it can do, because it's become weakened by the very activity that it was carrying on, and B, it's coming across denser and denser things. When that point happens, there may be a plateau, and that plateau could last for a while, right? So that is the equivalent of us trying to do the spiritual practice and trying to make progress in the spiritual practice. And that approach has gotten us as far as to have a certain stability of mind, being able to observe our thoughts, becoming more integrated with our somatics, differentiating the type of emotions that we're having, and so on. So many elements that made the whole content of our psyche more transparent or less dense in our analogy. But all the while, this work that we had been doing was being done by a someone, or is being done by an apparent someone. And that someone remains, let's say, conveniently hidden for a long time, but it is also serving a very useful purpose, which is to get us to the point where that's no longer effective, right? And that point can be noticed when we start to hit snags and walls beyond which it's difficult to go through, and we are in touch with a lot of raw emotion that we can't seem to get past, right? So now we seem kind of stuck in that mode, and it's not going any further than that. So that's the point where we need to start to realize that the trick now is to start to accept that density is there. Start to accept that it's just kind of there. Like the emotions are just kind of there. Suppose they're there for a good reason, right? And it's part of the process to become more turn to the receptive, you could say, right? So you were seeking things out, doing practices. It was very outy in the start, and then at some point that outy becomes inny. So you become like a sponge or an acceptance funnel for that stuff that is happening. And in doing that, you turn your practice into a yin type of practice. Now, some people are naturally more yin, so it could be that that was already more the case from the start. Sometimes you learn that, you forget it, and you go through like a seesaw of yin and yang type of approach. But there comes a point where you come to really become able to rest in receptivity. So you use your alertness not so much for doing stuff and going out there in a seeking mode, but to remain receptive to whatever is happening. And so that's a kind of reversal, or a kind of, it's almost like the polarity of your practice is switching from yang to yin. And it marks quite a transition point, which potentially didn't make so much sense up until that moment, because there was enough left to achieve, enough left to understand, enough left to work on to enable this to happen. Don't forget that you had, despite the illusion of being a spiritual seeker, had been nonetheless doing neurological, or psychosomatic work that reduce your density. And that reduction of density is in itself part of what requires and part of what allows you to become more receptive to the next part of the journey. Ultimately, what ends up happening is when the object becomes receptive to its own density, that receptivity reduces density even further, because it's you could say that it is lack of receptivity that was ultimately creating the core density of the object. So we become receptive to whatever is happening, and that makes us buoyant. Right? So you start to float up. There is place for yin practices and yang practices in your development. Getting a feel for the one that you need based on the stage that you're at, or whatever dynamic you're facing at that point in time, is something that you develop over time, right? It's encouraging to see some of the people that I've worked with as of late start to become autonomous as they not only understand the methods for self-cultivation, but also start to become akin to, I feel that I need to work on my strength of focus right now, for example, right? So that needs to be like a thing, because I have the receptivity, but I get distracted too much, and therefore the work, the cauldron of the alchemist that they call it, it has difficulty firing up, right? Because my focus is just not stable enough to do the kind of work. And on the other hand, if you are, your focus is very sharp, but you are trying to manhandle emotions or have a strong feeling of doership and identification with the kind of work, spiritual work that you're doing, or the persona that you're developing out of that, then the yin complement to that, in which you do practices of simply abiding, like the Zen Shikantasa, in which is just an abiding practice in which you literally sit and do nothing, is something that you can use as a complementary. So the yin is lacking, and that's where the work then resides, right? So you're trying to get this yin yang seesaw imbalance until it's immovable and you reside at the center. But until that is the case, I've made videos in the past saying how we are all in essence bipolar until we get that kind of equanimity that we need, from not having our minds being pulled to one side of the equation, whether it's yin or yang. So getting a feel for the kind of work that you do, and the kind of, do you need a little bit more fire or a little bit more water, becomes very important as time goes by and you become more intuitive at it. And to me, this explains how you can have moments where really, challenging yourself is the thing to do, and doing more sort of spiritual, let's say, practices as a meditation, study, you name it, mantra, whatever it is your thing, versus challenging the persona that might be developing on this side of the equation. And there has to be room for both, and their value and their moment needs to be understood for you to make it to the next level. So I hope that helps, and I'll be back with more. Cheerio.